Hi guys. Okay, so we are into week 12 and we've done a number of projects at this point. So this next week we're going to do a little reflection on what we've done thus far, and in doing so create something new. The name of this project is called the Postmodern Project, and to begin we want to talk about why it's called the Postmodern Project and then explain what you're going to do, and hopefully you'll understand why that is a postmodern exercise. So the first question is, of course, what is modern postmodernism? And the answer to that has many different branches. We could talk about semiotics, we could talk about deconstructionism, and we will. But to try to make it a little bit more simple for you, what we want to start with is that it's basically a rejection of modernist ideas. So, what are those modernist ideas? And modernism is a tradition that's been around since the Renaissance and maybe even before the Renaissance. The idea of a modernist thinking is that things can always be improved. Medicine can get better. Um, the way we build cities can be better. The way we make art can be better. So a modernist was always looking for a new way of doing things, or a better way of doing things. The idea is that ultimately we get to a point where it's utopia, right? Everything's as good as it can possibly be. Of course, if it's as good as it can possibly be, a modernist will still think it can get better. So because of that, some people felt that that mindset of always looking for the new thing or the next thing led us down paths that weren't necessarily better in the long run. Those people started to put their thoughts together in the mid 20th century, although they didn't necessarily get together in a room and say, let's come up with a new theory here called postmodernism. They just did things that called into question some of the ideas that had always been around in all aspects of society, but notably in the art world. And for our purposes, we're going to look at that. So what are some basic differences here? We're saying that a modernist is viewing history as progress, and a postmodernist might say that history is a lie because it's always written by the winners. And you notice I capitalized the word, or part of the word, his in there. And so there were feminist artists who started to think that just because art was always made by white males, that didn't mean that it was always getting better, that there was a bias there. And that's part of what we'll talk about when we talk about deconstructionism. A modernist also thinks that they must push history to push progress, whereas a postmodernist thinks that we must change the way we look at history in order to make better decisions. And then finally, a modernist would think that if we create the new, we will ultimately get to the very best place possible, which might work for things like medicine, but it might not work for things like politics, perhaps. And a postmodernist thinks that re-examining history might lead us to, again, better decision making. So let's move on to the next slide. We're going to give you just one example here. This is architecture, right? And this is a building from 1991 by Kengo Kuma. And it's a perfect example of postmodernism because instead of choosing one style and working within that style, Mr. Kuma here chose many styles. As you can see, I'll never forget the first time I saw a slide in college of a postmodern architectural house. And on the outside of the house, they had chain link fence as part of the siding because it was part of what you would see in a neighborhood, but it wasn't used as a decorative thing. It was a practical thing. And why wasn't it being used as a decorative thing? But if you look at this one building, it looks like many different buildings put together and many different scales of objects or parts of architecture. put together. So we've got industrial things. We can see the way that it's been constructed in areas. And then we have decorative things like that big capital that comes from Greek architecture. I don't know if that's Doric or Ionic. I think it might be Doric, but I want to say Doric is more simple than that. I'll have to check my architectural history to figure that out. But it's all this stuff smashed together into one building and then trying to balance that. Some people love it. Some people don't love it. So what are you going to do? This was a really brief introduction to postmodernism. But what you're going to do is you're going to examine your history. So I don't know why I embed myself. I always have to move myself. But your job this week is to recreate your favorite moments from the past few projects into one cohesive visual whole. So how might you do that? Let's say you go all the way back to the beginning of the year. You can get out that block print and you can print all over the paper with one of your block prints. Or we can print a larger version of that block print in Photoshop, and you can use that as a background for this piece. You could pick something from your first independent project and then paint that right on top of that block print. And then think about your second piece or your space project. Maybe you drew a vase, Alicia, and you can draw that right on top of that. So you're going to layer your history, things that you've already done in this class, onto a single sheet of paper or Photoshop document. And once you've got 3 things going, and I want it to be at least 3, then I want you to come back and look at it. What does it need? Is it working? Is it too busy? Is it balanced, or does it need something to be balanced? And whatever it is that you have to do then to respond to that piece, do it. Fix it. Okay? So we might have had a little interruption there, but I think I'm going to save this one so I don't have to go through it all again. So I'll escape out of this and end this video. Oh, I'm so slick with all this stuff. There you go. I'll talk to you guys in class.